That night, the bobcat curled against the veterinarian's chest and made a sound no creature born to the wild should ever produce. What unfolded inside a modest Montana animal clinic that day defied logic. A tiny, trembling bobcat was rushed through the doors, and at first, everyone assumed it was simply another cold-stricken rescue. But the moment the cub opened his mouth and reacted to the veterinarian's voice, everything changed. What followed left the entire clinic laughing in disbelief. This is a story you have to hear from beginning to end. That morning, the mountain air cut like glass. The cold seeped beneath layers of fabric and settled deep into the bones. Dr. Ethan Calloway had endured harsher winters in Pine Brook, yet something about that day felt off tight, brittle, as if the world itself might crack. He had just unlocked the doors of Pine Brook Veterinary Clinic, switched on the lights, and poured his first cup of coffee when hurried footsteps crunched across the frozen gravel outside. Before he could turn, the door flew open, blasting the room with icy air. Hannah Turner rushed in, still wearing her fire department jacket, clutching a gray towel bundled tightly against her chest. Her face was flushed half from the cold, half from urgency. "Ethan," she said, breathless. "I need you. Right now." Ethan didn't hesitate. Hannah never panicked without reason. He moved forward as she placed the bundle onto the exam table. The towel twitched. "I thought it was a kitten," Hannah said, tugging off her gloves with shaking hands. But then it moved again, and I realized something wasn't right. Ethan carefully peeled back the towel. At first glance, the mistake made sense. The tiny body inside was no larger than a teacup, shivering so violently that each rib showed beneath the thin fur. Then he saw the markings. The ears. The paws far too large. Ethan froze. "Hannah," he whispered. "This isn't a domestic cat." The cub lifted his head weakly. Golden eyes locked onto Ethan, far too focused, far too aware for something so small and broken. The pupils tightened under the clinic lights, then widened again, studying him. Hannah swallowed hard. "I found him behind the fire station. He was jammed into a drainage pipe. I thought someone abandoned a kitten, but then I saw the spots." She leaned closer. "Ethan, he's so tiny. I didn't know bobcats could be this small." Ethan couldn't respond immediately. He'd treated bobcats before, even newborns. But nothing like this. This cub could nearly fit in his palm, yet his gaze was sharp, unmistakably wild. "He's hypothermic," Ethan finally said, wrapping the towel more securely. "We need to warm him now." As Ethan placed the cub on a heating pad, the bobcat flinched at the sudden warmth, curling his paws inward. But his eyes never left Ethan's face. That unsettled him. Animals in shock usually went still, their awareness dulled. This one was watching everything. It felt deliberate. "Where exactly did you find him?" Ethan asked. Hannah crossed her arms. "Wedged sideways inside an old metal pipe. It was freezing rain when we got a call for a false alarm. I heard crying when I stepped outside, but it didn't sound right." She hesitated. It almost sounded like irritation. Ethan glanced up. "Irritation? Like a toddler grumbling," she said. "Not a meow, not a growl, something else." Ethan looked back down. The bobcat's eyes followed his mouth every time he spoke. With each word, the shaking eased slightly. "He's in shock," Ethan said softly. But even as he said it, the cub blinked slowly, intentionally, like he understood the calm in Ethan's voice. Hannah frowned. "Why is he staring at you like that?" Ethan didn't have an answer. There was fear in those eyes, yes, but also curiosity. "Purpose? I don't know," he admitted. "But he wants something." As if on cue, the cub released a faint, broken sound, soft and questioning. Not a call Ethan recognized. Hannah's eyes widened. "You heard that too, right?" Ethan gently brushed the cub's head with one finger. The animal flinched, then tilted his face upward, peering straight into Ethan's eyes. A strange chill passed through Ethan, one that had nothing to do with temperature. "All right," he murmured. "Let's figure this out." The bobcat blinked once. Ethan knew then this case wouldn't be ordinary. Nothing in his training explained what followed. Not the way the cub's ears snapped toward every sound. Not how his gaze locked only onto Ethan's mouth. And not the tiny paw that kept tapping against the towel, soft, rhythmic, deliberate. Ethan cleared his throat. "Maybe he's mimicking tone," he said. "Like an echo." Hannah shook her head. "No, that wasn't random." She leaned closer. "Say something else." Ethan hesitated. This wasn't a trick. The cub was still fragile. but his breathing quickened slightly in anticipation. "All right," Ethan said gently. "Easy." He chose the simplest word possible. "Hello?" The cub blinked. His mouth opened. "Low." Hannah stumbled backward into the counter. "Ethan, what is happening?" Ethan couldn't speak. He stared as the tiny animal trembled, eyes locked onto him with unsettling clarity. Then the cub lifted one bandaged paw weak, shaking, and tapped Ethan's wrist. Tap, 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 tap. Ethan went rigid. The taps weren't frantic. They were controlled, polite, like knocking. "Why did he do that?" Hannah whispered. Ethan felt the sensation echo through his skin. The cub made a faint, irritated sound. Hannah swallowed. "That sounded like he's answering something you haven't asked yet." Ethan tried to ground himself. Maybe he's hungry. At the word hungry, the cub jolted upright as much as his weak body allowed, releasing an excited trill. Hannah stared. "That sounded like yes." Ethan gripped the table. "I know what it sounded like," he said quietly. "I just don't know why." He prepared warm fluids. The moment the cub caught the scent, he burst into rapid, excited chatter, overlapping sounds, almost like syllables. Ethan guided the syringe to the cub's mouth. The bobcat latched on immediately, drinking greedily, chirping between swallows. Hannah whispered, stunned. "He's talking while he eats." Ethan huffed a breath. "Better manners than half the firehouse." She snorted, then clamped a hand over her mouth. When Ethan paused to refill the syringe, the cub lifted his head and released a sharp, unmistakably annoyed sound. "Re?" Hannah pointed. "He scolded you." Ethan didn't know whether to laugh or panic. "All right," he said softly. "I hear you." As feeding continued, the cub relaxed. His body warmed. His breathing steadied. The storm outside faded while the clinic lights hummed softly. When it ended, Ethan wiped the cub's chin. "That's better." The bobcat released a long, gentle hum, rising and falling in a disturbingly familiar rhythm. Goosebumps rippled along Ethan's arms. "I think he likes you," Hannah whispered. "That's survival," Ethan said. But even as he spoke, the cub leaned forward and pressed his cheek against Ethan's wrist. Hannah exhaled. "That's affection." Ethan didn't argue. As the cub drifted into sleep, Ethan stayed still, listening to the echoes of those intentional sounds. This wasn't just an injured animal. Something rare was happening. And Ethan knew whatever this bond was, it had only just begun. Ethan didn't protest, not because he agreed, but because the bobcat raised his paw and touched Ethan's wrist again, once, twice. Then 3 quick taps in succession. Tap, tap, tap. Hannah lowered her voice. "What is he doing?" The cub repeated the pattern, slower this time, as if waiting for recognition. Ethan bent closer. "Can you hear me, little one?" The bobcat's ears twitched. Then, impossibly, he replied, rough, breathless, drained, yet unmistakably intentional. Here." Hannah clutched her chest. "Ethan, he understood you." The cub curled inward once more, but his gaze never left Ethan. Those amber eyes carried something beyond fear or instinct, something that looked like awareness. Ethan released a measured breath. "I don't understand this," he said quietly. "But he's trying. Truly trying." Hannah nodded. "And he wants you to know he's doing his best." This time, Ethan didn't argue. He adjusted the towel, keeping the cub warm against the heating pad. The tiny body relaxed, breathing slowed, and before long, the cub drifted into a shallow sleep. "Do you think he'll keep doing it?" Hannah asked softly. "The sounds?" Ethan thought for a moment. "I think he reacts to attention. Tone. Presence." Hannah smiled faintly. "He's chosen you." Ethan let out a quiet laugh, disbelief lacing his voice. "He's a wild animal." She smirked. "Try convincing him of that." The room settled into silence, broken only by the hum of equipment and the steady rhythm of the cub's breathing. Ethan watched him, something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. This wasn't routine. This wasn't just another rescue. A fragile spark of hope flickered, uncertain, delicate, but undeniable. By late afternoon, the clinic emptied. Hannah returned to the station. Pinebrook slipped back into its winter hush. Only Ethan remained. He could have gone home. The cub was stable, warm, resting. But every time Ethan stepped away, the cub lifted his head, eyes searching. So Ethan stayed. He laid out a mat beside the exam table and checked the cub's temperature again, slightly improved. "Good," he murmured. "You're holding on." The cub stirred at the sound of his voice, releasing a faint, rattling hum. "I'm here," Ethan said gently. Later, when the room grew too still, the cub startled awake, chirping anxiously. "I didn't leave," Ethan reassured him. The cub tried to inch closer, dragging himself forward until Ethan steadied him. "You don't like being alone," Ethan whispered. He placed the cub into a padded crate beside his mat. They stayed that way quiet, watching one another until exhaustion finally claimed them both. Sometime during the night, the cub clambered out and crawled awkwardly into Ethan's lap. Ethan let him. The cub curled tightly against his stomach and released a fragile, trembling purr. Ethan swallowed. "That's unexpected." The night passed in stillness. Snow softened. The clinic felt hushed, almost reverent. Just before dawn, the cub stirred and murmured a sleepy sound. "Huh. Ray." Ethan smiled tiredly. Morning. When the staff arrived later, the cub greeted them eagerly, chirping, mimicking, responding. And when Ethan said, "Say hello," the cub answered without hesitation, "Hey, hi." The room exploded with disbelief. Ethan Calloway knew then, without doubt, that this bond, this impossible connection between a wild creature and a human voice, was real. Not coincidence. Not reflex. Something extraordinary. Ryan grabbed his face in shock as Hannah bent over, laughing uncontrollably. Even the interns hovering in the doorway clapped hands over their mouths. "Ethan," Becky breathed, eyes wide. "He said it clearly." "That wasn't chance," Ryan said, shaking his head. "Not even close." Hannah wiped tears from her cheeks. "This is unbelievable." Ethan looked down at the cub, now sitting neatly with his paws tucked beneath him, clearly pleased. The bobcat blinked up at him, expectant. "Well," Ethan murmured, warmth blooming in his chest, "you enjoy the attention." The cub replied with a single, confident chirp, affectionate and proud. Word spread fast. By mid-morning, staff drifted into the exam room, under thin excuses, hoping to witness it themselves. A receptionist placed a plush mouse near the crate. The cub pounced, then chirped triumphantly. A technician waved nervously from the doorway and nearly dropped her clipboard when the cub responded. Each interaction reinforced the truth this wasn't random sound. The bobcat was engaged, alert, responsive. Everyone left smiling, shaken by what they'd seen. Around lunchtime, Hannah returned with food and leaned into the room. "You surviving?" "Barely," Ethan said. "People are asking for photos." Hannah laughed. "He is remarkable." The cub chirped and tapped the crate. Hannah crouched. "Hi there." The answer came instantly. "Hi. Hi." Her smile softened into awe. "Ethan, you know this is communication." Ethan didn't reply. He didn't need to. As the day wore on, the clinic resumed its usual rhythm, but at its center sat something rare. Every time Ethan passed, the cub lifted his head, tapped the blanket, and chirped eagerly. And now, everyone felt it. By the next morning, the story had woven itself through Pinebrook the way only small-town news could. Whispers at grocery aisles. Paused conversations at gas pumps. Even the mail carrier found an excuse to knock. But beneath the wonder, a heavier truth pressed into Ethan's chest. No matter how special the cub was, he was still wild. And the wild always called its own back. The cub healed quickly. Swelling eased. Strength returned. His coat thickened, gleaming beneath the lights. And as his body recovered, his voice grew clearer, more confident. By week's end, the teacup-sized cub wasn't so small anymore. Friday morning, Ethan entered the exam room to find him standing on all fours. His injured leg touched down carefully but without pain. When he saw Ethan, he burst into excited chirps, tapping the blanket in that familiar rhythm. Ethan swallowed. "Look at you," he said softly. "Walking again." The cub took a shaky step. Then another, tail flicking with resolve. "Confidence," Hannah whispered. "He's changed." The cub chirped dangerously close to Hi. Hannah gasped. "Oh no, he's getting better." Ethan didn't smile. Hannah noticed. "What's wrong?" Ethan lifted the cub gently for a final exam. The bobcat leaned into his touch, humming softly, pressing his cheek against Ethan's sleeve. Ethan exhaled. "It's time." Hannah nodded. "You're letting him go." Saying it aloud hurt. "It's right," Ethan said quietly. "That doesn't make it easy." By noon, the carrier was ready, lined with familiar blankets. The cub climbed inside willingly as long as Ethan kept his hand there. Outside, The cold bit sharply. Snow crunched beneath Ethan's boots as he loaded the carrier into his SUV. The cub made a questioning sound. "I'm here," Ethan murmured. Hannah rested a hand on his shoulder. "It hurts because you did this right." They drove toward the forest. At a clearing near a frozen stream, Ethan set the crate down and opened the door. The cub hesitated, then turned back, eyes bright. "You belong here," Ethan whispered. The cub released a long, aching sound. "He's asking why." Hannah breathed. Ethan rested his hand inside. "Because this is home." The cub stepped out, sniffed the snow, then returned long enough to tap Ethan's hand once, twice, 3 times. "I know," Ethan whispered. "I'll miss you." With one final sound, the cub vanished into the trees. Ethan remained kneeling long after. The clinic felt wrong without him. Too quiet. That night, Ethan listened for sounds that never came and wondered whether letting go always felt this much like loss. Life moved on, but the absence lingered. Days passed. Silence softened. The ache remained. And sometimes, when the wind moved through the trees just right, Ethan paused, breath held, wondering if the forest might one day give something back. Because some bonds don't disappear. They just learn how to wait. Ethan exhaled slowly. "I know it was the right thing," he said. "I just can't stop wondering." Hannah stayed quiet, giving him space. What if he wasn't ready yet? He was, she replied gently. Alert, confident, and curiosity keeps animals alive. Ethan dipped his head, though the doubt lingered. "You didn't lose him," she added. "You gave him his future." "It doesn't feel that way." She didn't try to correct him. That evening, Ethan found himself beside the vacant carrier once more. His mind replayed the cub chirping at his own reflection in the stainless steel bin. "You were a handful," Ethan murmured. "Always noisy." His throat tightened. The silence wrapped around him dense, watchful, like the building itself was holding its breath. Nothing broke it. At dawn, pale sunlight spilled across the frost-covered ridge. Ethan unlocked the clinic earlier than usual. The quiet remained, but beneath it, something subtle stirred. Expectation. Delicate. Uncertain. Alive. He couldn't explain it. Nothing was different. And yet, it felt like something was about to happen. "Wherever you are," he whispered, "stay safe." For the first time since the cub had left, the weight in his chest eased. Grief loosened, replaced by something else, soft, restrained, unmistakable. At 10 sharp, Hannah stepped inside. "You look wrecked." "I didn't sleep." Her voice softened. "Still thinking about him?" Ethan said nothing. Hannah turned to speak again, then stopped mid-breath. "Ethan," she murmured. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" She raised her hand. "Wait." At first, only stillness. Then, tap, tap, tap. Ethan's pulse spiked. Hannah grabbed his arm. "Tell me that's not..." Tap, tap, tap. Maya leaned out of the hallway. "Someone at the door?" Ryan squinted. "Sounds like a kid knocking." Ethan didn't think. He moved slow, steady, pulled by something instinctive. He reached the door, rested his palm on the handle, inhaled and opened it. Cold air surged in. Snow drifted lightly, and there, sitting calmly on the porch, was the bobcat. No longer tiny. Still young, but powerful now. Solid. Alive. His golden coat caught the light, his posture confident, wild, yet unmistakably familiar. The bobcat lifted his head, flicked his tail, raised his paw. Tap, 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 tap. Ethan laughed, breath caught halfway between disbelief and joy. "You came back." Behind him, sharp breaths, quiet sobs, stunned silence. The bobcat chirped, clear and bright, full of pride. Ethan lowered himself slowly. The animal showed no fear. At Ethan's feet lay a fresh pine branch. "You brought this for me?" A warm trill answered. "He brought you a gift," Hannah whispered, tears spilling freely. Ethan reached out. The bobcat pressed his nose into Ethan's palm, purring low, steady, unmistakably real. "I hear you," Ethan said softly. The bobcat brushed his cheek against Ethan's wrist, just as he had before. "He remembers," Maya breathed. "This one always would," Hannah replied. The bobcat chirped again, same rhythm, same meaning. "I missed you too," Ethan murmured. The pine branch rested between them, simple but intentional, a message without language. Some animals remember, some bonds endure, and some creatures, no matter how wild, choose where they belong. Emotion tightened Ethan's chest as the realization settled in. The cub he had released believing goodbye was final had crossed snow and forest to return. This wasn't accident. This was choice. Behind him, the staff stood frozen, afraid to disturb the moment. Even the air felt reverent. The bobcat stepped closer and gently pressed his forehead against Ethan's leg. A deep purr resonated through the porch, vibrating straight into Ethan's ribs, filled with trust and recognition. Ethan exhaled unsteadily. "I missed you." The bobcat lifted his head and nudged the pine branch forward again, releasing a soft sound melodic, unfamiliar. Re. Hannah stepped closer, voice trembling. "Ethan, he's trying to say something." "He always has," Ethan replied. The bobcat settled back, tail curling neatly. His eyes held memory, something learned, something remembered. He opened his mouth again, shaping careful sounds. They weren't wild cries. They didn't belong to the forest. They were meant for him. Ethan leaned closer. "What are you telling me?" The bobcat focused, lifted one paw, and tapped Ethan's wrist once, twice, then several quick taps. Tap, 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 tap. The first night. The fragile paw. The beginning. "I remember," Ethan whispered. The bobcat chirped brightly and leaned in, nuzzling Ethan's arm with the same persistence he'd shown during sleepless nights. His purr deepened. The moment hovered fragile, complete. Ethan cupped the bobcat's face gently. "Is this how you say thank you?" The animal stilled, then carefully formed a sound imperfect but intentional. "The." Gasps rippled behind him. Hannah broke down. Maya covered her mouth. Ryan swore softly under his breath. Ethan felt his chest tighten. It wasn't perfect, but it was meant. The bobcat had said thank you in the only way he could. Ethan rested his forehead against the bobcat's. "You're welcome," he whispered. The bobcat chirped softly, almost amused, then stepped back and shook the snow from his fur. He studied Ethan one last time calm, knowing. Then the wind shifted. The forest called. The bobcat turned toward the trees, paused, and released one final sound, a gentle rise and fall, like the last note of a song. "Hey, I'll hear you again," Ethan said softly. "I know it." The tail flicked once. With effortless grace, the bobcat leapt into the snow and vanished between the trees. Silence settled. Not empty, not painful, but whole. Hannah exhaled shakily. "Did that just happen?" Ethan nodded. "Yes." Ryan wiped his eyes. "I've never seen anything like that." Maya laughed through tears. "Do you think he'll come back again?" Ethan looked toward the tree line as snow continued to fall. "If he wants to," he said. "He will." The others drifted inside, voices hushed. Ethan stayed a moment longer, snow gathering on his shoulders, forest murmuring beyond sight. There was no grief now. The bond remained changed, but unbroken. As he turned back toward the clinic, one truth settled deep within him. Sometimes the wild doesn't only take. Sometimes it gives back. And somewhere beyond the trees, carried on the Montana wind, Ethan was certain he heard it again, a playful trill, a promise. The story may end here, but the bond endures, woven into the breath of the forest itself. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching.